Structure Deck Blue Eyes White Destiny releases on Valentine's Day. Not that any of you would know anything about that, because you play Blue Eyes, you stupid loser. But since we're both alone, forever, I figure we best stick together and talk for a few minutes about the new cards in the Structure Deck that actually were successful at propelling Blue Eyes, which were kinda stuck in 2016 for a while, into competitive viability. Let's break it down. Been a minute since I've said that one. Maiden of White is a level 1 spellcaster tuner that can send herself from hand or field to place the True Light directly from deck, summons herself from grave when you summon the heckin' Blue Eyes White Dragon, and when she's targeted, reborns Blue Eyes or a level 1 light tuner. Neo Kaiser Seahorse is a level 4 dragon tuner that can summon itself if you control Bluey, can move a light tuner's level up or down 1, and if it goes from field to grave, can mill a Blue Eyes monster or a monster that mentions Keanu Chungus. Wishes for Eyes of Blue pitches a card to search a level 1 light tuner and a friend of the show, and can banish itself from grave to equip a Blue Eyes monster from extra deck to a Bluey you control. Roar of the Blue-Eyed Dragon summons a Blue Eyes monster from deck, grave, or banished, but it has to be Bluey if you don't control him, and locks you to dragons. And guess what, baby? It's Ground Xeno again! Ground motherfucking Xeno! Greatest card ever printed! I'm so fucking xenophilic, bro! Majesty of the White Dragons pops a card your opponent controls for each Bluey in hand, field, and graveyard, and can banish itself from grave to ritual summon tributing Bluey. Spirit with Eyes of Blue is a link 1 for any level 4 or lower dragon or spellcaster that locks you to dragons while he's on board, searches or mills Mausoleum on summon, and contribute itself to reborn a Blue Eyes monster negated. Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit Dragon is a synchro that needs at least 2 tuners and a Blue Eyes monster, protects the cards in your graveyard from being banished, negates a card or effect every turn and gains 1000, and when he's destroyed, reborns a light dragon. Indigo Eyes Silver Dragon is everything wrong with card design. This is every single noob trap they could squeeze onto a single card. The purpose of Indigo Eyes Silver Dragon is to get you to rehash the exact same discussions of how it can be effectively used that you've already had about other cards that were not good because of these exact same problems. Indigo Eyes Silver Dragon was printed so that you can win a game at your locals by attacking directly with it, and then come here to tell me that that means I'm wrong about it without critically assessing whether you were already going to win that game anyway. Indigo Eyes Silver Dragon maybe ranks among my least favorite cards in the history of the game. But hey, at least it fills out the extra deck on the $30 build pretty nicely. Oh wait, they actually give you a lot of extra cards in this structure deck. It might just not make the cut. Aside from that, all these cards work in tandem to practically reinvent Blue Eyes with better enablers for many of the different things the deck has tried to do over the years. Because Blue Eyes support has been a thing for so long that Blue Eyes isn't so much a deck as it is an idea. Blue Eyes White Dragon is a normal monster. He suggests nothing. He was created as long before Synchro Monsters as a Yu-Gi-Oh card can possibly be, but at some point they decided Blue Eyes support will focus on level 1 light tuners. Alright, sure. Whatever. Blue Eyes White Dragon stands for nothing. He has no morals or principles. Each card impresses its own meaning upon it. Famously, in 2016, Blue Eyes White Dragon's gimmick became Beating Pendulum and Burning Abyss. Blue Eyes White Dragon is a political tool, a symbol that those in power can use to enact their vision. What I'm getting at is that this is Chainsaw Man. Maiden of White and Wishes bridge the gap between Sage and True Light, giving you a search for Sage that gets you to your powerful engine of advantage, and a spell that True Light can search that gets you to Sage. And both of them are doubly powerful on account of the other parts of their effects outside of just this one loop. Wishes sends 1 copy of Ash Blossom from your opponent, searches both a monster and any spell trap that you would have otherwise searched with True Light, so at the cost of a discard you get a free monster on top of getting Roar for further extension, or Majesty is another disruption. Also relevant that pushing your True Light search onto Wishes lets you add the card to hand instead of setting it, so you can use Ultimate Fusion on that same turn without having to run 3 for... bingo. And the graveyard effect is useful not only for enabling Tyrant Dragon, a good card for wielding the battle phase as a form of removal, but also because it lets you put Neo Ultimate in the grave for a free one-time targeting protection. And Maiden coming back whenever Bluey hits the board is one of your most valuable ways of making level 9s like Spirit every turn, as is her ability to summon not just Blue Eyes when she's targeted, but either half of the Synchro equation. So Mausoleum, Sage, and Master can all target her to get Blue Eyes, and she can chain to summon the tuner to sync with. And now Mausoleum is accessible through Spirit with Link of 1, meaning any normal summon in the deck can get you to an extra normal and a Blue Eyes on board. This makes it easy to use Sage twice per turn, since the first one will get you all the way to Wishes, getting you right to the second copy, who can search an Effect Veiler and then make another Spirit Dragon. Or you could use Master as your extra normal and add back the first Sage for easy follow-up, or even for more extension, since now you'll have both Master in grave and Sage in hand to attempt to summon more Blueys. And this is all for the most part in service of getting to multiple Spirit Dragons who have gotten a little bit better over the years. Its own negate is still as relevant as ever, stopping all sorts of random effects like Engraver and Druis Worm, while the Floodgate is maybe not so well positioned. Off the top of my head, it stops, what, Ztrstee. Supreme Darkness is not even out yet when I'm writing this. I have no idea if that deck flopped yet or not. Meanwhile, the tag out has done nothing but improve as more and more targets hit the shelves. Obviously, Ultimate Spirit Dragon is designed with the express purpose of being a perfect companion for him, being just a little bit too impractical to hard summon, but being a simple Omni-Negate for anything on field. And when he dies in the end phase, you can float back into Spirit Dragon, or really any of your Blue Eyes dragons. We also have the very recent addition of Lightstorm, who you can tag into after your opponent sets 5 to pop 3 of them with just 2 blueies engraved. And then upon his planned self-destruction, you can set anything from an Imperm to a Wishes that'll be activatable as soon as your next bluey hits the board. You can also tag into my arch nemesis on this mortal plane, Ancient Fairy Dragon, who can summon yet another tuner from hand so you can make her into Crystal Wing, and also pop Mausoleum to grab Secret Village, which even if you end on just dragons, can be turned on by using True Light in your opponent's draw phase, triggering Maiden to return to the field. But maybe most famously, Spirit Dragon now has the option to summon the Crimson Dragon, which, with the understanding that you'll generally be making at least 2 Spirit Dragon, vastly widens the horizons of what you can tag into. Just in terms of targeting the other Spirit Dragon itself, you can tag into Hot Red for another on-field Omni with better timing, or into a quick Trishula. Pairing Crimson with Ultimate opens the door to all the different mega awesome sugar-coated forms of Stardust Dragon, like Cosmic Blazar, the most versatile, but also Cipher Divine Dragon, a monster negate with a disjointed pop that's seen play in the OCG because its effect protects each card you control from being destroyed once each turn, keeping the vulnerable True Light safe while also stopping Ultimate Dragon from dying in the end phase. So you can end on a pretty sick board of some diverse Synchro Dragons with potentially Majesty or Ultimate Fusion set in the back, a True Light for follow-up, and an Effect Veiler in hand. The oddball of this support is Seahorse, who isn't searchable but can be a starter or an extender if you draw him. By linking him into Spirit, you can mill Maiden and set up the summon of Bluey to trigger Maiden, and then use Maiden from field to set up True Light and get the Sage to extra normal, but because you have to use Maiden from field, you miss out on one of your tuners, and as a result have a pretty hard time making 2 spirits outside of convoluted AFD Ash Dragon plays. As an extender, you can drop him on any board with Bluey and hard make Crimson Dragon, then mill Jet Dragon to set up his protection. His level modulation effect is a janky way to let him be a valid material for Ultimate Spirit, which needs 2 tuners, so his 4 stars are by default too much, but his strongest application is milling Chaos Max, a Chaos Ritual monster that's a valid material for Dragon Master Magia. Getting Ultimate Dragon Engrave is obviously as easy as equipping it with Wishes, so you can dump them both and use Ultimate Fusion to make your triple threat. If you just clutched your pearls and your wallet at that one, don't worry, this wasn't super popular in the OCG, since even though you can ritual summon it with Majesty if you draw it, playing another brick in Chaos Max is not ideal. What did catch on and what really made the deck take off in the OCG was the Primite engine, specifically with the introduction of Aether Barrel. There was of course always some experimentation of using Load and Roar as more ways to summon Bluey, and Drill Beam as another disruption, and an extremely strong one at that. As a mild tangent, Negate and Remove is a very uncommon type of effect on a targeted interruption. Usually you'll only see Negate and Destroy on an effect that has to chain, while effects that negate any card on the field usually don't also destroy. So Drill Beam is a uniquely powerful piece of disruption and removal, worthy of being the payoff for playing vanillas. And it's easy to keep it live into your opponent's turn in this deck, even as you sync off every copy of Bluey you summon, since True Light can bring one back right at the start of your opponent's turn. Similarly, this deck has an easy time working with Roar's disruptive effect, because 3000 is the biggest number printed on any normal monster. And although they obviously can't get you into Sage and Maiden, they can get you to, at the very least, a level 1 tuner to make Spirit Dragon off of just load. In the OCG, the pick was Space Omajinayo Sagi, a level 1 light spellcaster, conspicuously printed only a month after all of these cards, that can be moved around by Sage, Master, and Maiden if you so choose, but unless they do something really funny in this structure deck, our best option is Flamvelgard, a dragon that can be linked into Hieratic Seals or Spirit if you want. But the same is true of Aether Barrel, the most recent addition to the engine that not only works reciprocally with load, but also turns on Drill Beam in more ways than one. Although the mistranslation was resolved before the West fell, normal summoning Barrel and then activating load gets Drill Beam to hand ready to be used as a board breaker. And since you now have a Primite monster that's a little more useful than Imperial Dragon, you can actually use the reset effect, meaning you can pitch it for Wishes turn 1 for free, and then it'll come back every single turn as long as you keep adding back a normal summoning Barrel. For Blue Eyes specifically, he's another dragon that can be made into Spirit, so drawing both him and Sage is perfectly fine, and if you're trying to use Roar, you contribute Spirit for its effect to Reborn Blue Eyes, and chain the Roar so it'll resolve on an empty field to summon to. They can't get you to True Light and your Sage engine on their own, so from just Barrel or Load, usually it'll just end on Seal and Drill Beam, but with the recursion of Barrel and Beam every turn, this can be enough to get into a decent grind game. Meanwhile, there's a couple things outside of Blue Eyes worth mentioning with Spirit specifically, like how it's a link 1 for dragons that points down. That doesn't make it specifically better than Striker Dragon, especially with the Dragon Lock, but since that's already a type of lock that Dragon Link has to account for while Pisty is on board, it's fair to call it a new tool in their arsenal. Meanwhile, for spellcasters, White Forest has some uses for Spirit as well. At the very least, making any of your main deck names into Spirit to get to Mausoleum, and using it to bring out Blue Eyes breaking the Dragon Lock, will leave you with a level 8 body on board to make into Crimson Crimson Dragon, and not just one free spell to send in Mausoleum, but 2 because Mausoleum can search Burst Stream of Destruction. That's maybe a little too brick soupy, but don't worry, it can get worse, because Arciela can also search Sage, meaning that you can use her and Mausoleum's Extra Normal to truly bridge these two decks and end on a combination of White Forest back row and Spirit Dragon targets, or the biggest fucking token you've ever seen, folks. Alright, so the last thing I want to briefly touch on, because it's almost entirely speculation, is regrettably Fiendsmith, because there's actually, let's call it a debate about whether that's the direction you should take this deck. For one thing, you may be wondering why did the OCG not play Fiendsmith in Blue Eyes, and more broadly, why is Fiendsmith not as omnipresent in the OCG as it seems to be in the TCG? And the answer may surprise you. I feel like a good number of people will try to square away any lack of understanding they have with the OCG to something to do with Maxi, but there's a more direct difference here that explains this particular phenomenon: Necroquip Princess. At first glance, this was just the TCG's attempt to preserve rank 6 plays in Fiendsmith despite the impending loss of Fusion Lacrima. But if you look closer at the math, you'll find that having to go through Sequence into Fusion Lacrima to make Wave High King Caesar will force you to shuffle back Requiem and level 4 Lacrima, cutting you off from dumping Paradise on your opponent's turn. So any Fiendsmith line that leads with Tracked, Lurry, or Moon simply does less in the OCG than it does in the TCG. The only starter that does still get to Caesar and Paradise is Engraver, who's now limited. This is to say nothing of having to go through Sequence turn 1 and introducing even more choke points, or Necroquip's effect to draw coming up as often as it does. As for why Blue Eyes specifically might still have trouble with the engine of all time, for one thing, Blue Eyes White Dragon? Not an effect monster. Link Spider can make up for the cases where you need to use Bluey from Moon, but that's even more extra deck space that you can't even recur in what's already quite a stacked extra deck. You'd probably have to cut the Crimson Dragon package entirely, especially since the material that you'd use for Requiem is usually what you'd otherwise be making into one of your 2 Spirit Dragons. Now, as for why Blue Eyes might still be willing to play Fiendsmith in spite Nibiru, the answer is Nibiru. Because Ultimate Spirit Dragon can only negate effects on field, you don't actually get to affirm Monster Negate in your standard combo until the very end when you tag out Crimson Dragon. While you'll still often have interruptions in Drill Beam and Majesty, this is a pretty annoying weakness for your end board. So threatening Caesar to force that out and still being able to make another Spirit Dragon and maybe even tune the level 11 Primal Being token into Crimson will leave you with the most interruptions possible. Also, if the whole line resolves, it is just more disruptions. Think about it, if you use Maiden and Bluey for Spirit Dragon, that's at most 2 negates from those 2 materials. But if you make Moon, you get to 2 Caesar negates and Desiree Send. Objectively better use of your time. Mathematically. Also, and this is funny, Sage and Maiden trigger Necroquip to draw. I love triggering Necroquip to draw. It's my favorite thing. I am just spitballing ideas though. I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. Maybe there's even something I'm missing. This is one of the harder parts of my job, is when I just can't know something. There's no data to draw from, no format to look at where all these cards exist together already. Just keep your balls peeled and we'll figure this out together. Anyway, all those cards are really expensive, and I know if you could afford them, you'd be out with a Blue Eyes White Woman instead of here with me. So let's talk about the $30 build. If you're a fan of balling on a budget, you're in luck this time around, because like the Trap Trick Structure deck 2 years ago, this product is doing a lot of heavy lifting to get anyone getting into the game for the first time set up with as many good hand traps as possible, like Ash, Nibiru, and the searchable Effect Veiler. What's missing though is I guess what I'd call the finishing touches. For one thing, to replace Max C, they slotted in Master, who was a nice addition for a budget build that'll more resemble pre-barrel lists, but doesn't fill the same role at all. He's another engine requirement instead of another hand trap, throwing the ratio of engine to non-engine a little out of balance and forcing you to fill the extra space with some engine cards that are not amazing. And then there's also the problem of what board you're even building towards, because there's not really something to do with 2 Spirit Dragon. Obviously there's no Crimson Dragon package or Moonlight Dragon in the Kaiba product, so the only interruption you can tag into is Ultimate, which is hard once per turn. If you make a second Spirit, the best you can do is tag into Azure to protect Ultimate and avoid it dying in the end phase. Surprisingly, they did include Hieratic Seal, so you can turn a tuner into Spirit so that it and Bluey can fulfill the 2 dragon requirements, or you could play White Stone of Ancients to not only preserve your copies of Spirit, but also whip out Jet in the end phase as a free bonus. All told, you can make a pretty baseline competent Blue Eyes deck with just 3 of the structure, even though you might have to play some of the old Blue Eye support that I'm not really a fan of. Which is really interesting in a lot of ways, because most of those underpowered old support cards used to be considered the reason to play the deck. Melody turboing out Alternative used to be premium removal, but now it's a massive Ash Magnet that makes you play this bricky level 8 extender you don't really need. Bingo Machine used to be a reasonable way to search most of your deck, but now you can just set up True Light turn 1 and guarantee whichever back row you want. Meanwhile, most of your monsters aren't even Blue Eyes monsters anymore. Modern Blue Eyes does not have much use for these cards because because something in the deck's philosophy shifted. The dragons themselves, the many retrains of Bluey, are no longer your playmakers. If they wanted to make good main deck big dragons, they would. But I think what we're seeing is a very conscious effort to rehabilitate the real White Lightning. A statement that Blue Eyes White Dragon should not be the worst Blue Eyes monster you're playing. And so, Blue Eyes, the archetype discriminated through the text in the name box, is more or less being cleaned out, whilst the low-level tuners, your Eyes of Blue and what have you, are becoming stronger. The cards that don't stand in the place of, but rather support Blue Eyes White Dragon. Their strength comes not from using Blue Eyes as a tool, but rather the utility of their shared support of— God damn it, this is Chainsaw Man!